Welcome to Ask the Expert, North Texas, here at News Radio 1080 KRLD. I'm David Rankin.
And I'm Kristen Diaz. And this horrific tragedy that happened at the Allen Outlet Mall this weekend once again put the spotlight on mental health. And the conversation often goes that we talk about our family, our friends, how to talk about this with our children. But a group that often gets left out of this conversation is how our first responders deal with their mental health. The pandemic has exacerbated the stress and anxiety of your job, where you are always, most of the time, seeing people who are at their worst. Matt Zavadsky with MedStar joins us this afternoon, the KRLD Afternoon News. And Matt, when you're working with your crew, preparation is key for any type of response. But when you have a triage situation like this, what was the response, the preparation like for what happened this weekend?
We often say that you can train for it, you can prepare for it, but it's really, really hard. However, with the training, with the drills that we do, to some extent, the field providers go into a little bit of autopilot. The training kicks in, the muscle memory, the adrenaline helps. We know what to do. We know how to save lives. The hardest thing for the field providers to do, though, is to make triage decisions. When there are more needs than there are resources, we have very difficult decisions to make. You could have someone who is gravely injured, but is still alive, and then 3 other, 4 other, 5 other more people who have serious injuries who could survive if you treat them, but you know that 6 people treating the patient that you know is not going to survive is not a prudent decision. Making the decision to not treat someone so that more people can survive is gut-wrenching.
Yeah, it really goes against the whole medical standard of do no harm. And it's just got to be an agonizing decision. And who is the one that actually has to make that kind of a decision out in the field?
In central locations or incidents that have a central location, there's usually what's called a triage officer, and they help make those decisions. However, in a situation like the Allen Mall and situations like larger scale events, it's up to each individual crew. We typically go in teams of 3 or 4, and really it becomes the decision of that team leader. We're gonna pass on this patient because I can see 4 others that are hemorrhaging, and if we can control their hemorrhage or we can correct their obstructed airway, 4 people will survive. But if we get tied up treating this one patient who has virtually no chance of survival, that goes contrary to our goal of survival of the most from any large-scale multiple casualty incident.
We are now a couple of days removed from the initial incident in Allen this weekend. And it's often said that, and just as you reiterated, when you're in the moment, you go through your training, your adrenaline rush. It's not until a couple of days after that you really start to realize what you just went through. Are North Texas first responders dealing with that right now?
They absolutely are. And, EMS, a career in EMS is one of the most rewarding, but one of the most gut-wrenching careers that you can possibly have. In situations like Allen, or like we just saw in Brownsville, or anything like that, we've had many of them here, it's the day or 2 afterwards. And that's why EMS agencies, communities really need to help catch providers off of that high. For 24 hours after the incident, we're fine, right? We're tough. We can handle it. It's after that first 24 hours where people begin to crash and recount what happened. And that's where the community really needs to come in. Their agencies need to come in with the resources to catch them, to literally catch them and help them through the grieving process, the stress. Often it's that cumulative stress of, your last 5 years on shift, your last month on shift, the time away from your family, compounded by what we see every day, that just takes that one little push to push us over the edge and lead to potentially tragedy, and all too often tragedy.
What's the level when we're talking about the stress levels for first responders? I mean, they're just people just like everybody else as they're watching the news and watching the situation unfold. We're at least separated from it. They're at the scene. And you talk about a couple of days later how they can crash from it. What resources do they have available to them to deal with that crash?
Thankfully, the concept and the importance of mental health in first response organizations and first responders have really gotten a lot of attention, arguably since and during the pandemic. So organizations, at MedStar, we have what we call our Hope Squad. And it's a group of folks who are peer counselors. They are selected by the employees, who are people that they will feel comfortable going to if they're struggling, or they're trained to notice when, hey, David, you're not acting right. I mean, that may be true all the time, but you're not acting right. You're normally upbeat. You seem really depressed. You seem really down. You're withdrawn, and they can go and draw them out and say, hey, let's go have a cup of coffee. Let's talk about, what resources you might need. Many agencies are doing that. There's a national effort to really begin training first response organizations in mental health resilience, and some national organizations like the National Association of Emergency Medical Technicians has a certification course in mental health resiliency officer. And so many people are taking that class, so we can try and have at least 1 or 2 or 3 mental health resiliency officers in every EMS agency across the country to really watch out for this issue.
Some studies have shown that up to 37% of EMS workers have contemplated suicide. And that also suicidal thoughts or, mental health issues affect not only our EMTs, our firefighters, paramedics, more so than the average American. Are these numbers surprising to you at all?
They're not, Kristen. Sadly, I've been in EMS for 43 years. I still work out in the field. And just in the last 5 years, I've had 3 friends who have committed suicide. And it's not just witnessing, having a front row seat into man's inhumanity to man, victims of violence, shootings, stabbings, but neglect. I went to a call recently where parents had put their 3-year-old in a dog kennel for 1.5 years. And we were called out because this kid was barely clinging to life. And, you look at those types of scenarios day in, day out, but then you add the fact that EMS is a 24/7 responsibility. People work nights, weekends, holidays, they're away from their family. The pay stinks, so they're often working more than one job. Those non-work stressors added to, again, witnessing that tragedy every day really does begin to take its toll. And that's why being aware of the mental health needs of all first responders becomes very important. There are some agencies in the Metroplex who have implemented a 48-hour on-duty shift. Mm-hmm. So imagine now that you're dealing with this sort of stuff for 48 straight hours. I can only imagine what that's like for folks that are working that kind of schedule.
You have mass casualty training events. Is there any way to do any kind of mental health training events?
Yeah, we really do. And having programs like Hope Squad, having mental health resiliency officers, and really part of the training is how to identify, how to intervene in a way that's not threatening. Part of a first responder's persona is toughness, right? We're fine. We can handle anything. And it takes a lot for someone to realize, yeah, you know what? I'm a mess and I need help, because it takes a very strong person to acknowledge the fact that they need that help. And thankfully, because of the awareness, because of some of the training that these specialized peer counselors are getting, they can approach people in a non-threatening way, and in a way that someone could, over, again, a cup of coffee, over a conversation, even signing up to work a shift with them in the field, and just talk to them in between calls, can really make a huge difference with preventing a suicide.
Absolutely. My last question to you, Matt, is there enough personnel to help with time off if someone needs to step away to clear their head? We've heard of a lot of industries, all types of industries, especially medical, though, that are short-staffed. Is there the help that you need when it comes to filling a shift?
Most progressive agencies recognize the fact that time invested in preventing someone from leaving your organization, or worse, suffering suicide or a complete breakdown, is well worth the investment to give them the time off that they need to recover. And I can tell you at our organization and others that I've been in, when our supervisors recognize that, hey, this is the second cardiac arrest that this crew has treated in the last 4 hours, and the last one was a child, they will literally go out and see that crew and say, okay, you guys are done. Thanks for your help today. Take a couple of days off. We'll find coverage for you. And that's happening more and more. Police departments are doing it. Fire departments are doing it. EMS agencies are doing it. It's something we have to do. And if that means that someone picks up the shift, works an extra shift, everyone is willing to do that. And we'll share with them, hey, we need to give Kristen and David the day off. They just had their third pediatric death in a week. Everybody's like, yep, I'll cover for them, no problem. And it's quid pro quo. So they'll do the same thing for us when we need that time off. It's worth the investment, and a lot of agencies are able to do it.
Matt Zavadsky with MedStar here on the KRLD Afternoon News. Thank you so much for the time.